When evidence law transitioned to Section 63 of the Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam, it was intended to modernize the admission of electronic records. Instead, the government's drafting of Section 63 introduced significant ambiguity regarding how digital evidence must be certified. The confusion focused on Part B of the Section 63 certificate, specifically concerning the exact legal qualifications required for an individual to sign it. The Pune Bar Association used this ambiguity to formulate a specific, restrictive interpretation of the new rules. They contended that Section 63 required every single certifier to hold formal recognition as a digital evidence examiner under Section 79A of the Information Technology Act of 2000. Because this specific certification is highly restricted, the Bar Association argued that requiring it for routine evidence admission made the standard process unconstitutional. If applied universally, this interpretation would force every piece of digital evidence through an impossibly narrow procedural bottleneck, stopping the admission of basic electronic records in Indian courts. The restrictive interpretation moved quickly from theory into judicial practice. A judgment from the Madras High Court supported the reading that a formally credentialed Section 79A expert was mandatory for these certificates. This created an immediate chilling effect for trial courts attempting to admit simple digital records, like emails or server logs, from private entities. The issue reached a Supreme Court bench consisting of Chief Justice Surya Kant and Justice Joymala Bagchi, who moved to resolve the deadlock. The court issued a direct ruling. Individuals providing Section 63(4) certificates do not need to be officially certified as digital evidence examiners under Section 79A. They decoupled the baseline admissibility of electronic evidence from the requirement for state-sanctioned credentialing. By separating standard legal functioning from specialized governmental gating, the Supreme Court verdict rescued the digital evidence pipeline. If a 79A certification isn't required, we have to define what actually constitutes a valid expert under Section 63(4). The Supreme Court established a standard of functional competence. An expert is anyone technically capable of interpreting the digital document and capturing it without manipulation. A formal university degree in cyberforensics is not a statutory prerequisite to meet this baseline threshold for admissibility. The capture process is treated like a photographer taking a picture. The output must remain a truthful, unmanipulated representation of the visual observation. This flowchart illustrates technical requirements for a Section 63 output. A captured raw file follows two paths. For static documents, the certificate must contain a physical printout. Alternatively, if the evidence is audio or video, the certificate must contain the exact hash value, a cryptographic fingerprint. This functional methodology ensures that any other person with reasonable technical expertise can repeat the exact same capture process and yield the identical result. Baseline admissibility relies on this transparent, repeatable methodology to prove the artifact has not been modified after the certificate was signed. There is a primary technical vulnerability in this capture process. A single, unmodified raw file can look different depending on the environment used to view it. Opening a web page in different browsers or applying proprietary software filters to an image changes how the data is rendered to the screen. These environmental variables can alter the document's rendition without any malicious intent from the person capturing it. As a legal consequence, two separate experts can capture and certify two differing versions of the exact same document, both acting in good faith. When two contradictory Section 63 reports arrive in court, this specific conflict triggers an escalation protocol. This is where we see the true statutory purpose of the Section 79A Digital Evidence Examiner. They function as a dispute resolution mechanism. Courts must only mandate a Section 79A examiner when they need a state-credentialed authority to audit the environmental variables and determine which technical version represents the ground truth. This targeted appellate role is distinct from the Pune Bar Association's assumption of a blanket mandate for all evidence. The 79A examiner is an appellate authority reserved for complex rendering disputes, not the gatekeeper for routine evidence. Removing the 79A credential requirement places the legal risk directly onto the functional certifier. The law requires a standard of due diligence during the initial capture and preservation. If an expert is negligent, their failure can be argued as complicity in producing false evidence. However, there is a clear legal boundary between certifier negligence and external tampering, such as a scenario where a document is properly certified but modified later by a bad actor. As long as the certifier acted in good faith and utilized a sound methodology for capture, there is no liability on their part. The legal burden and criminal charges for tampering fall on the individual who altered the document. A certifier's safety is secured by the rigor of their own capture process, which provides the necessary shield against downstream liability. While certifiers can protect against human tampering, they now face a threat from algorithmic interference, generative AI. The requirement of capturing a truthful representation is directly threatened by automated upscaling, interpolation, and synthetic enhancement tools. Even when used innocently to clarify a blurry image or clean up audio, AI processes overwrite original pixel or wave data with predicted information. Altering that underlying source data inevitably corrupts the original cryptographic hash value required for verification. Any AI enhancement creates an artificial rendition. It fails the Supreme Court's baseline test for unmanipulated capture. Because functional experts are responsible for observation integrity, they must proactively defend their methodology against invisible algorithmic alterations. To counter the generative AI threat, digital forensics practitioners like Naavi have developed a specific, practical disclaimer for the certification process. Every Section 63 certifier is now advised to include an explicit disclaimer detailing the technology used in their capture. The disclaimer must state that the capture, preservation, and certification process did not employ any generative AI, synthetic reconstruction, automated enhancement, interpolation, or similar technology. This disclaimer draws a legal line separating the certifier's raw, observational capture from modern algorithmic manipulation. This decision by the Supreme Court clarifies the practical application of Section 63. By dismissing the Section 79A bottleneck, the court ensured that digital evidence remains practically accessible within Indian courtrooms. The barrier to entry has been lowered, but the burden of maintaining a rigorous, transparent, and AI-free methodology now rests with the certifier.